Again? Really? We just had this nonsense 2 days ago. It might have even been yesterday. I can't believe I'm filming the exact same video again on a different day. I spent 5 hours working in the garden this morning, out there with the weed whacker and the machete, getting rid of all kinds of summer vegetables that are overgrown, chopping down all kinds of mint, chopping down all the green beans that aren't producing because it's too hot, chopping down all the cucumbers that got mildew and caterpillars, and chopping down all the summer stuff. I just went out there, you know, I'm not delicate about it. I go out there with a weed whacker and a machete, and I just whack stuff down. And then I have a nice, you know, thick mulch of green material that I just let sit for a couple weeks, and then I move it, and underneath is beautiful soil that I can plant fall and winter crops in. That's one of the secrets to gardening that a lot of people don't know about. Whatever your worst season of the year is, use that season for cover cropping. If you live in a place up north, your worst season of the year is probably the dead of winter. Use that season for cover cropping. If you're somebody like me who lives in the tropics, your worst season is the middle of summer, June, July, August. That's when there's very little producing. So instead of just hiding in the house in the air conditioning, I should use June, July, August, September to plant summer cover crops. Cover crop. Always cover crop in the season that you don't want to grow vegetables. You got your main season, and then you got your off season. Whatever your off season is, it might be winter for you, it might be summer for you. Whatever your off season is, use that off season to cover crop. So that's mostly what I do in the summer. Like I said, I use a lot of beans. I'll plant beans in the springtime, use them as cover crop. I'll plant sunflowers, sunchokes. What else I had as cover crop? Oh, all the spring clover. I let all the clover, the crimson clover, the purple clover, the red clover, and the Dutch white clover, I let them all just, you know, go through winter and into the spring. And that makes a really good summer cover crop. What else? Soybeans. I did soybeans as a cover crop this summer. I was hoping to harvest them, but the deer ate them all, so they ended up being a cover crop. What else? There's quite a few things that I use as cover crops in the summer. But anyway, a lot of the crops are drowning. So I did the corn update the other day where I talked about how I had to move the corn, not move the corn. I planted the corn 6 times in the backyard with no luck. So I decided to plant some corn in the front yard. And I put all these traps out to keep the rats away. And now the corn is just gonna drown. There is no way that that corn is gonna survive 3 or 4 days of 4 to 6 inches of rain per day consecutively. That corn is gonna drown. I mean, those are fabric pots, which are the most well-draining things on the planet. They drain out the sides and the bottom. If you can't keep something dry in a fabric pot, you're out of luck. I mean, they are the driest of dry when it comes to container gardening. And that fabric pot is filling up with water. And the forecast says it's going to be like this every day for about a week. 3 to 4 inches of rain per day, every day, for a week. Everything in the garden is just going to drown. There'll be some things that are okay. But almost everything is just going to straight drown. All these bell peppers out here will be rotten. All the succulents. Mother of thousands. The cacti. All this stuff is not going to be happy. Ice plant. Avocado trees. Aloe. Not going to be happy. The stuff in the backyard's even worse. The front yard stays a lot drier than the backyard. The backyard is a legitimate swamp. All the frogs and stuff back there. I don't know when I'm gonna get the grass cut. Way too wet to be even thinking about cutting grass. This dumb shit again. That's some dumb shit in my opinion. Having to empty out my birdhouses before the birdhouses fill up with water and break the rope. I miss living in the desert. I lived in Mojave Desert. It rained twice a year. And when it rained, we would go outside, you know, no clothes on and just run around in it and enjoy it. We were very happy for it. But in a place like a desert, the only thing that grows is what you plant and water. There's no weeds in the desert. That was my favorite thing about farming in the desert. There's no weeds. If you're not watering something 3 to 4 times a day, it doesn't grow. There's no grass, there's no prickly cyda, there's no dollarweed, there's no Bermuda grass, there's no Palmer amaranth, there's no dockweed, there's none of it. You don't have any weeds in a desert. And a swamp is exactly the opposite. A swamp is where you have the highest amount of weed pressure if you're trying to garden or farm. Swamps are the highest weed pressure because they're continually moist. They're wet and hot most of the time. And so anything that you plant and try to cultivate as a crop is just going to be absolutely dominated by the native weeds. So that's why I've tried to build everything up. You know, instead of doing in-ground gardening in a swamp, which is a terrible idea, I try to build everything up with, you know, 2 and 3 foot, 4 foot, sometimes more than 4 foot high raised beds. And that keeps everything a little bit drier, but you still get those weeds that, you know, reproduce by underground rhizomes that try to get into the raised beds. So farming in a swamp is very, very difficult. Okra is about the only thing that really thrives here. Okra, mint, trying to think of some other things. Rice does really good. What else? You can do things like taro and maybe some Hawaiian sweet potato. A lot of times they root rot, but they do all right here. Leeks do okay. There's a handful of other crops that'll tolerate, you know, continually wet conditions and sometimes anaerobic soils. Doesn't look like it's going to be nearly as bad today as it was 2 days ago. But it's a shame about the corn flooding out. Even in pots, I don't think it's going to make it. I think most of the corn's going to die. It's funny, when the rain comes down really hard, it sets off the traps. You can see there's 2 traps that have been set off by the rain. It's kind of funny. Sometimes the rats manage to like walk around the traps or walk over them and not set them off. But occasionally the rain will set them off, which is kind of ironic. But anyway, I was gonna say hopefully things will dry out, but that doesn't appear to be in the forecast. Got at least 5 more days of this nonsense. I'm not sure when I'll ever be able to cut the grass.